Welcome back to week 10 of Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We've watched episode 46, which originally aired October 1st, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Eden lands her parachute. As she's falling, she says, "Uh-oh, I'm going to miss it."
Yeah.
And she lands right on the stoop of the Lockridge mansion. So Warren comes out to see whose it is as she's taking off her parachute. They recognize each other. He asks her out for a hamburger. She says she's got a party to get to.
Now, I'm assuming they're maybe roughly the same age.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Joe, up in Alaska, shows his photo of Dominic to the nurse that's there at the clinic. She doesn't recognize the face.
No.
Then later Joe sneaks past her to get into the patient ward.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the patients says, "Oh, yes, that's one of her identities."
Mm-hmm.
And Joe goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Oh, this is a woman that used to be here. She was a good master of disguise, and we used to make up different disguises for her, and this was one of them."
So it sort of sounded like making disguises was perhaps part of their arts and crafts program there, or maybe some part of role-playing exercise they would do. But it's interesting that is the only patient, maybe the only patient who was well enough to recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly not something the staff seemed to be aware of at all.
Yeah, you would think if they knew about Jane Doe is the name that she's given. If Jane Doe's costumes and disguises were something the staff knew about, you think they would have realized that. So maybe that's something she did privately with that other patient.
Yeah, maybe.
So, not clear if Joe can find a patient in a place like that trustworthy, because the previous person, said, "Oh yeah, that's the doctor."
Yeah, yeah.
But Joe actually kind of left without showing the photo to everyone.
Yeah.
And this lady just came running up to him, so he kind of, having flown all the way to Alaska, he certainly didn't interview all 5 patients. He skipped over a couple of them.
It does seem to be a very small hospital, or else he's just in an extremely isolated ward.
Mm.
Yeah.
So he then shows the picture to a doctor, not letting on, where he got the information saying, "Oh yeah, this was a woman named Jane Doe that was here maybe within the last 5 years." And the doctor said, "Well, if I don't recognize her, we have a lot of Jane Does, and I can't give you access to any of our records."
Yeah.
But I just somehow feel the doctor may have been hiding something.
I felt like that too.
I don't think the nurse was, but I think the doctor was.
Yeah, because the nurse actually had only been there for 2 months.
Oh, that's right.
So if this is, one idea we've had is that this might be Sophia, she might have been there a long time ago and left, and maybe that is what Dominic is a fugitive from.
Oh, that's a good point, yeah.
So this might actually have, Joe hypothesizes it was over the last 5 years, which it may well be, but it might have conceivably been a lot longer than
ago.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't expect Joe will fly back right away. Maybe he'll try and break in and look at the files himself. I think
that's
what Warren would do.
Well, and he's flown all that way, right?
Yeah.
So I think he'll maybe do a little bit more investigation to try to find out the identity of Dominic.
Mm-hmm. Now, Lionel and Veronica discuss potential repercussions of Cece's birthday present.
Yeah.
But Lionel says just stick to the story we came up with, so it'd be interesting to see what that is. And they mention how they knew each other.
Yeah.
Apparently in Africa, Lionel saved her little brother Bobby's life in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some backstory filled in that we were wondering about.
And that does show us the depth of Veronica's loyalty to Lionel.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just a cash relationship. He hasn't just paid her to do work for him. They don't appear to be former lovers, or if they are, that wasn't the primary part of their relationship. there is really a much deeper bond there than we had realized before.
Yes. Now back at the big party, Mason is kind of angry about Cece and Santana.
Yes.
Cruz says that he was pretty slow to catch on and reveals that he had kind of figured it out.
Yeah, Cruz is rubbing this in a little bit, and I think he has a right to do so.
Mm-hmm. Cece gives a toast to the family and to friends and to Eden. Starts opening his gifts. Pamela sent a photo album of their years together.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing incendiary, unless there's something hidden in there.
It made me think that maybe this is setting us up for Pamela returning for a little visit. Maybe she's reminding Cece of their relationship because she's going to be coming back into his life for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Santana sourced some handmade candlesticks that he really likes. Gina and Brandon arrive unexpectedly with a gift, and so Gina and Brandon end up meeting Rosa. Mm-hmm. So Rosa meets her grandson without realizing it.
Yeah.
Cece ushers them into the study for the gift opening so that no one else can bother them.
Yeah.
And it's a captain's cap.
The Admiral's cap.
Oh, yes. Worn by Admiral Bull Halsey in World War II.
Yeah.
It belonged to Gina's husband, Stockman.
Mm-hmm.
Then they leave, and then Cece opens Mason's gift, and he's really happy that Mason
he's so
pulled
pleased.
off the coup to get the Lockridge property, and he offers Mason the job of general counsel to Capwell Enterprises, which Mason says he would love to have.
And I found this quite interesting because for as long as we've been watching this show, CC has been urging Mason to seek government, and we've had this sort of ongoing discussion of Mason seeking the district attorney job or whether he wants to continue on even as a lawyer. And it's interesting that being the general counsel for CC's company is a bigger deal for Mason than to be a district attorney or to be a governor. And it's interesting too that that counsel is somehow more unattainable for Mason than being a district attorney or a governor.
Mm-hmm. Well, just as they're about to finalize the deal,
yes,
the doorbell rings, and Rosa opens it to find Eden removing her orange parachuting outfit to reveal a black party dress underneath.
Yeah.
And Eden comes in, so that pulls the focus off Mason right away. And
Mason doesn't look very happy.
Pushed into the back. Yeah, I don't know if he's just unhappy with the timing or if he has an issue with Eden.
Yeah, I wondered that too.
Eden meets Peter for the first time and mentions that she was not at Lyman when he was there. And then I think it's Ted that she talks to about Peter, being possibly not a good choice for Kelly, but she doesn't let on to Kelly at this point. And it's mentioned that Eden's been gone for 3 years. And it sounds like she left right after school, but I don't know if that's, high school or if she got a degree in something first.
So I was actually trying to work out some of the timing on this, and maybe you have a thought about it. So she's been away for 3 years, and she's never met Peter. But we know Peter was instrumental in the whole dispute that Channing had with Joe back in 1979, which was 5 years ago. So I guess my question is sort of what was Eden doing 5 years ago? And also, how does that affect the timeline Peter had at Lyman? Because apparently he did tutor both Joe and Kelly at Lyman, and he did teach at Lyman, and he's been on the scene long enough to basically break up Joe and Kelly, see Joe off to prison, and get engaged to Kelly. So how does that work out with Eden's timeline?
Well, I'm thinking maybe if Eden did a four-year degree at college, and that started 3 years ago in 81. Then she's been at college for 80, 79, 78, 77. So even if she was living at home during that time, depending on where she went, she might not have been aware of Peter. I don't know.
Maybe.
Because, I don't know, maybe if Joe and Kelly were friends with him, they may have just met him in his office at the school. So even if Joe and Kelly mentioned Peter, Eden wouldn't have met him in that context. And then maybe Peter just waited a couple of years before pursuing Kelly after the trial. I mean, it seems, I don't know, maybe he had something else to do. Maybe he wasn't actually actively thinking of pursuing Kelly during that time.
It does indicate that, at the very least, Peter was keeping a low profile. And was, at least as far as Eden, she didn't even really know anything about him, pretty much a non-entity for that time. Maybe he was doing that on purpose because he was on the run from Ginger. But, yeah, that was just one thing I was curious about.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how they didn't manage to cross paths for, at least 2 years after the trial. I mean,
Santa Barbara's not that big,
trial.
And I imagine their social set is pretty small.
Maybe even was busy with something in addition to her schooling that would come up. Now, Cece manages to talk to everyone at one point in this part. He pulls them off into the corner. Peter tells Cece that something's going to happen to Joe when he gets back from Alaska, which Cece's happy about.
Yeah.
Then he pulls Ted aside and says that Mr. Bottoms is going to be giving him weekly reports on Ted, and there better not be any negative ones. So then Mason finally gets Cece back to himself and says, let's talk about that job that we were talking about. And Cece said, not today. This is a fun day.
Yeah. So
it can wait.
That momentum's been lost now.
Someone hands him the package with Lionel's gift. So he opens it up, and it's a tape recorder that says, "Play me." And Mason, of course, is expecting a tape. So he says, let me play that for you. And he manages to hit the eject button. The tape falls down, and Mason crushes it with his foot. It's destroyed. Mason is safe.
Yeah.
So then Cece opens Peter's gift, and it's a copy of the tape.
Well, it's not actually identified as Peter's gift.
We don't know it's Peter's gift.
I think
we had assumed after we watched that it was Peter's gift.
Yeah, because Peter has this little smile on his face. I think that was the gift in the last episode. Remember, we were talking about how Lionel's gift got delivered at the same time as another gift.
Oh, I see.
And one of them gifts said from an acquaintance, and I actually have a feeling that was maybe Peter's gift.
Oh, okay. So Ted takes the tape machine.
Since Mason
has
obviously
Cece doesn't want to give Cece doesn't want to give Mason another chance to destroy the tape. Cece really wants to know what's on this tape.
Yeah.
And they play a long portion of the conversation Mason had with Veronica. The whole Attila the Hun Hitler comparison. So Mason goes, that's not my voice. And he has a very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
Later on he says, it sounds a lot like my voice, but I don't, it's not me.
And, I think just with that reaction, we're starting to see why, Mason is pompous, he's pretty ruthless, he's Machiavellian, all of that. But we're actually starting to see why some of the other characters, and I think to some degree I would include Cece in this, I actually view Mason somewhat contemptuously. Because he's also got a bit of a cowardly streak, too. Or certainly not a very honorable streak. And in a way, as all this unfolds, which we'll talk about what we saw this episode, I almost think it might have gone a bit better for him if he had owned it. And I almost think, if we think back to when Ted was trying to convince Cece to let him go to Hollywood, Cece really liked that Ted was standing up for what he wanted to do, even though it was kind of ridiculous. And I actually wonder if Cece would have a little more respect for Mason if he actually owned what he was feeling about things
Mm-hmm.
and his stance.
He's had, a week or two to come up with a solution. And he didn't even try to do the thing, or maybe he slightly did yesterday, that Peter did, where he tries to, like, front load it by maybe making references to it beforehand. Like when Peter thought Augusta was going to tell Kelly about them, the very next day he, threw it into the conversation with Kelly that he and Augusta had something in the past.
Yeah.
You'd think Mason could have, I don't know, spent the week referring to Cece as Attila the Hun. In a half playful way.
That's
to try
right.
and get Cece used to hearing that from him.
Yeah, I mean, Mason's had a copy of the tape all this time. He could really have come out in front of this, I think, in a few ways to at least diffuse it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And, he doesn't have any, he doesn't even mention that he was really drunk or anything.
Yeah.
Cece obviously would believe after the last conversation they had. So, Cece immediately says, who's this woman on the tape? Does anyone recognize her? Peter goes, that could be my secretary, Veronica. And Cece immediately phones her and says, Veronica, come over right away, or gets Peter to phone her to come come over, come to the phone. He plays the tape for her over the phone. She claims not to be able to make anything out over the phone. That doesn't give her a reprieve because he says, well, then come over here immediately.
Yeah.
So, that gives people time to consider whether they want to stay at this party or not. Cruz says, I think I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And he leaves, says goodbye to everyone. But then Eden runs to the door and exits before he can leave.
Yeah.
And he's kind of lingering at the door, so I'm thinking he may have been expecting her to come out after him. And she asks why he's still in Santa Barbara after, he's put out the fire. So clearly they know each other. And he says, why did you pick now to visit? And she says she's staying in Santa Barbara. And he says, well, sorry to disappoint you, Eden, but I'm staying too. I like it here just as much as you do.
And this is kind of interesting because at the party, when Eden first made her entrance, she and Cruz kind of made a point of not seeming like they knew each other very well. Yeah,
they shook hands for a bit of a long time, but, they didn't, appear to know each other.
Yeah, and now it turns out they may have some history.
And he knew all about the firefighting and stuff that he'd done, so that's interesting. Who knows if Eden has been talking to Ted more about stuff that's going on?
Yeah.
Santana also decides to leave. Then Mason tries to leave. Cece says, no, you come back. Veronica arrives.
Yeah.
So that's how we left things at the Capwell match.
So I thought, the big reveal with Santana and CC, that one kind of got deflated over the course of this party, what with the whole situation with Mason, what with Gina showing up, what with Eden's showing up. And I thought there was a bit of coolness between Santana and Eden.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe because, they did all grow up together.
Because no one's really seen Eden for 3 years. So CC's ecstatic. He gives her a big hug. Kelly's happy. Ted's happy. The servants are all happy to see her. But, Santana and Eden, it's just kind of like, oh, it's nice to see you again. Mason, of course, is standing there looking quite annoyed that she's stolen his thunder, or there might be history as well. Cruz is pretending he's never really met her before. So there's a lot of potential things with Eden.
Lionel says to Warren, Oh, good. Another spoiled rich kid in
Yeah.
the neighboring house.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing I was just going to mention was with Veronica coming, we don't know what she's going to say yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could go either way. I think, the obvious thing would be just to throw Mason under the bus and, let this be the beginning of his life being ruined, as Lionel sort of threatened to do. But then again, it occurs to me that if she saves Mason in some way, Mason will be beholden to her, and therefore beholden, unbeknownst to him, to Lionel.
Oh. Yeah, because I couldn't really see what benefit it would make to Lionel to get Mason out of this job.
And this might be it's possible, might be some kind of a long game that Lionel's playing, again, kind of from the shadows, because Mason wouldn't know he was involved, to maybe get back some of the Lockridge holdings, or maybe, sabotage some of the Capwell holdings through Mason.
Yeah, I can't see them getting that beachfront property back again at this point, but we'll see.
Is the deed in CC's name or Mason's?
I would think he would have put it in CC's name.
But
unless it's under Capwell Enterprises,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So maybe there is some way to break it up. I don't think Rosa had a scene with Santana after the reveal about CC.
No, I don't.
So I think she'll be popping over to Santana's apartment the next episode after she's cleaned up from the party.
Yeah.
I didn't really see evidence of the. Maybe I wasn't thinking about it with all the excitement, but the decoration that Mason had Santana do.
It seemed pretty.
I didn't notice
bones
anything at the front door when I thought about it. I thought, oh, where's the decoration? There was nothing there other than a tablecloth on the table near the wicker chairs where all the presents were. Seems to be their main area.
Yeah, we have another. We're not quite at the end of the episode yet, are we?
No, we still have one thing. I was trying to figure out what room they were in. There's a white room that they've been in a couple times recently.
Yeah.
It's not the living room. So at the far right of the set, closest to the camera, there's a double French door that leads to their living room, which has this big fireplace in it on the back wall. This was actually at the far end of the set, the back right, another set of French doors. And that led to this, what I call the white room. And it then has a window facing out the back onto, it looked like just some beige stuff, so I don't know if there's an outbuilding there or something that we saw. So, and then I'm not quite sure if there's actually another room in between the living room and the white room, because I was never quite sure which room Cece was doing the weight lifting in a few weeks ago. So there might be, the exercise room might be in the middle of those two, off the atrium, or unless it's in the back.
And we know those are all on the same level, do we?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where the weightlifting room is, but I think anything that has the double French doors is off the atrium. And then things with the solid doors are upstairs off the various hallways. And Ted approached the study from a weird angle when Gina and Cece were in there. He came from the camera. I'm used to them coming the other way. So I'm really not sure where the study is. I think it's on the ground floor, though, behind the set that we should see. I don't think it's upstairs.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I may have to contemplate that. Maybe someone online has some plans of the layout.
You were actually commenting during this episode how effectively they were doing all the blocking, because all through this episode there were characters going off to one side having little side conversations.
Yeah. It's like in one of those Another World party scenes they used to have where the entire cast was in one room, and this is with, a third of the cast, let's say. So at the Lockridge place, Warren is packing up some stuff to take to his apartment, and Lionel comes in and he tells Lionel about encountering Eden, which is when Lionel says, oh, another spoiled rich kid next door. And then Warren tells him that Minx is still quite mad about losing that property and is planning to get even with Lionel. and she's been making a lot of long-distance phone calls. So I can't imagine what that is about.
Well, didn't we hear, probably a few weeks ago now, some mention of Minx's control of the board?
That's right.
And that Lionel could be tossed off it if she got annoyed enough with him.
So maybe she's pulling him off everything.
Yeah, that would be my suspicion.
Maybe he'll have to get a job at the museum because he'll pull that of.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that would be my suspicion, that she's actually pulling the reins in. And I think Warren is probably right to warn Lionel. I mean, Lionel's just kind of laughing it off as just, old Minx.
He says the
word. But I actually think
Minx
he's being a bit complacent here.
That could be, yeah, because she's actively doing something.
She's really upset over the property.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lionel was, well, first of all, ideally he was hoping that he could keep it, and she would never know that there had been a mistake made. But having failed that, I think he had hoped that he could contain it by pointing out that the initial mistake was made in the distant past.
Mm-hmm. And then she said, "Don't say anything negative about your father."
Yeah.
So.
And she did point out, as others have, that if Lionel had really reviewed the paperwork, I guess perhaps when he took over the position he has of responsibility, that this would have
could
all
have been rectified at that point.
Yeah.
So the next time we see Warren, he is breaking into Rudy's pawn shop.
Yeah.
Now, this must be the storage depot of Rudy's pawn shop, because it's the one with all the filing cabinets.
Yeah.
So, luckily it's labeled in the back. So Warren takes some bolt cutters, maybe the same ones Peter used to get into Joe Perkins' garage the other day. And he rifles through a lot of very hollow, empty-sounding filing cabinets. But does open one that seems to have two folders in it, and they happen to be the 1979 pawn documents that he's looking for.
And he's not really delicate with them. Like, he's making no attempt to make it look, to just kind of slide in and slide out. I mean, he's kind of tossing stuff all over the place.
Mm-hmm. But little does Warren know, when the door slammed shut, that the latch fell into the closed position, and this is not a latch that can be opened from the inside. So he's actually locked into that storage room with the filing cabinets and
which
a flashlight
apparently
and
no
nothing
one
else.
visits him ever.
Well, we may find that he's rescued inadvertently by Dominic breaking into the same place.
I think he has to, I don't believe this is the end of Warren's story at all. I'm sure someone will rescue him, and my own theory is it probably will be Dominic coming to look at the same thing. It could be Augusta, who's following him, or maybe has followed that same trail to try to get at those records and keep everyone off Warren's path. That's another possibility. Maybe Joe, although I think Joe's still got some work to do in Anchorage, but I would expect Joe or Dominic's going to follow up on that pawn ticket eventually.
Maybe Dominic's already followed up.
Maybe.
And is just waiting there for someone else to try and break in. So maybe
Yeah,
Dominic's actually watching.
That's a possibility
every night
as well.
to see who's going to come in there.
Yeah.
That'd be very labor intensive, but the hope is, I guess, the investigation would trigger that from the real killer. So yeah, it would be interesting to see Warren and Dominic have an encounter.
Yeah.
Where Dominic assumes Warren could be the real killer. Interesting to see. Oh well, I'm excited about several of the things. And hopefully Joe won't just have wasted his trip to Alaska.
Yeah. It's a long way to go for the few things he's found out so far.
Mm-hmm. I think that's about it for this episode.
I think so.
So we'll be back after we watch episode 46 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
This week's spotlight is on Bridget and Jerome Dobson, who created the show Santa Barbara. Bridget Dobson is the daughter of Frank and Doris Hersley, who in 1963 created the series General Hospital. She married Jerome Dobson in 1961. In 1975, the Dobsons became the head writers of The Guiding Light, which almost immediately switched formats from 30 minutes to 60. The Dobsons agreed to the switch as long as their salary was doubled. When interviewed about Guiding Light storylines, Bridget Dobson said, "It was not conceived or written for the audience. We wrote to please ourselves." In 1979, the Dobsons took over as head writers on As the World Turns. Reports are that they were moved to the other show, as having Guiding Light as the #1 soap threw off the Procter & Gamble corporate strategy. During the transition, they ended up writing both shows for a month. They brought As the World Turns to #1, and then left their jobs. It took NBC offering them creative control to start a new series that brought them back in to writing serials. In 1984, they created Santa Barbara, which began airing on NBC on Monday, July 30th, 1984. The Dobsons were locked out of Santa Barbara's offices in 1988 after they repeatedly attempted to fire their head writer, Ann Howard Bailey. The Dobsons sued NBC and New World Television, and Bridget Dobson referenced the lockout in her Emmy speech that year. After the case was settled, the Dobsons returned. The Dobsons were nominated for Best Writing Emmys in 1976, 1978, and 1987, and won Writers Guild of America awards for the 1980 season of Guiding Light and the 1992 season of Santa Barbara. In 1995, the Dobsons moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Bridget started a new career as a painter. Her paintings have toured the United States, and her company, Bridget Dobson Studios, also produces fine china, crystal, and giftware.
Welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We are in week 10, and we've watched episode 47. Original air date October 2nd, 1984. The pawn shop is now on fire. Or not
full of smoke.
He didn't think it was enough to steal the stuff, but to cover his tracks, he set everything on fire.
Yeah.
And then he realized he'd locked himself in. So he was banging on the door, shouting for help. I thought, oh, Dominic's going to rescue him any second.
Yeah.
No one came.
No.
But luckily there were a lot of empty file folders around, and he managed to slip one between the door and push the latch up. So he freed himself.
Which I know I certainly did not expect it to end that way. So good for Warren.
Mm-hmm. And he has to get back to work at the beach bar, and we see Summer bandaging his hand, which he says he burnt on his car engine while he was fixing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're hanging out for a while as she continues to fondle his hand for a good part of the episode.
That's right.
And vice versa. And then he goes to Chuck, I guess his coworker, and asks him to cover his shift. But Chuck doesn't really readily agree. So he wants to know how far along he is with Summer first before he commits to working an extra shift.
Yeah.
So. Now, back at the Capwell house, Veronica tells Cece that's not her voice on the tape. She's never heard anything like that, and she's never heard Mason say anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's what she and Lionel had worked out for her to say.
I think so.
I think in the long run, she's thinking this is the best for her and for her cover.
Yeah, I think so. And as we discussed in our last podcast, this may actually further Lionel's goals as well.
Mm-hmm. So Peter's angry with her and says that he can't trust her, so he basically fires her.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think may be part of the plan, because next thing Veronica, hovers around Mason. Mason has complained to Cece about being humiliated in front of everyone in the family, and Cece says, "I'm not sure what you're getting at." And Mason blames Cece for the entire family falling apart, from Kelly and Joe to Eden not being home, and Cece's not pretending, doesn't comprehend any of it. So Mason seeks out Veronica and thanks her for lying for him, and she manages to slip in that Peter has fired her, and so he immediately tells her not to worry about that, and goes to Peter and says, well, Peter, you need to double Veronica's salary.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, she's not trustworthy. And he says, well, I might have to tell Cece about you and Augusta.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter says the only reason he was with Augusta was to get information on the property and to help try to get Joe out of town. But
yeah.
Mason doesn't really buy that and says he's not going to help Peter get the money he needs either.
Yeah.
But Peter, I think, is thinking that someone in the Capwells will pay him. One of the Capwells will pay him to get rid of Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And he's already hidden something under Joe's seat. So he phones an anonymous tip into the police, saying there are drugs hidden under Joe's motorcycle seat.
Yeah.
So.
And I have to say, Mason has form through all this because, first of all, that is really his voice on the tape. And, of course, then he goes into full outrage mode when Veronica lies about it and is suddenly very, very offended that anyone would have questioned his integrity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it was funny the way Cece said to Veronica, oh, yeah, the first tape accidentally got stepped on or something. I think he even says Mason stepped on it, but he doesn't lay any blame on that.
Yeah.
So Cece basically says, oh, people are always out to get families like us.
Yeah.
Pranksters and people.
But Mason is basically in a sulk for one reason or another this entire episode.
Because next thing, Eden grabs him and says, oh, Daddy, you haven't gone to see your plane yet. Which is interesting, because we know from the beach bar that it's already night.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I don't think he'd want to trek out in the dark to a hangar and see his plane when he could see it in the sunlight the next day. So he wants to know how she afforded it, and she says investments. And he's very impressed by that, which Mason overhears and frowns in the background. And then he saunters over and starts to put down Eden for being gone so long.
Yeah.
Now, Cece is angry with Kelly because she's hanging out in the study waiting for Joe to call.
Yeah.
He basically says he won't tolerate this in his house. And Kelly says that he won't have to worry if he keeps treating family members like that. He'll be living in an empty house soon.
Yeah.
So, Cece basically says to her that Joe's about to go back to jail, but won't elaborate. So Kelly packs her bags and leaves.
Yeah.
And if we didn't already know that Tony was no longer going to be appearing, we'd think she's probably going to go stay with Tony. So I don't know. She could stay on the yacht, I guess. Capwell Hotel. Bunk with Cruz. Bunk with Santana, maybe. Lakin owes her a favor. So we'll see where she ends up. Maybe
Sorry, who's Tony?
Dr. Tony?
Oh, Dr.
Dr. Tony, her best friend?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Eden's not too happy that Cece just let Kelly leave.
Yeah, Eden's the one who really stands up for Kelly. So that's kind of nice that she's got one ally still in the family. Cece seems to be annoyed with all these kids in this episode. Eden not so much, but Mason for sure. Kelly. And even Tad, he's still threatening him with the possibility of military school if he doesn't shape up.
Now up in Anchorage, Joe, as we predicted, does break into the hospital.
Yeah.
Looks through the files, finds one labeled Doe, Jane, Santa Barbara, which sounds like exactly the right thing. But it's empty.
Yes.
Maybe Dr. Richards has gotten there first. Or maybe Dominic has gotten there first. So he leaves a message for Dominic to meet him. And Joe goes to the warehouse. Dominic's actually there, but doesn't reveal herself to Joe. And only like a few seconds later, the phone rings. Joe picks it up, and it's Dominic from a nearby phone booth saying, "Why did you want to see me?"
Yeah.
And Joe says he went up, he found someone who knew her, knows she's a woman, and Dominic demands to know why he went to Beacon House.
Yeah.
But Joe doesn't answer that. So then Joe hangs up, and Dominic says, "He's too close." Or he knows, something like that. Jade and Danny borrow Joe's bike while he's out of town, which is unfortunate because Peter's called in the police, and they question Marissa about where the bike might be, and she said, well, Jade might have taken it. She sometimes does, and she'd be at the beach bar. So the police track them down there, immediately find the cocaine under the seat, and arrest both of them.
Yeah.
Now, Cruz arrives at the Campbells and tells the family that cocaine was found under Joe's bike. And Cece says, this is what we need.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Kelly may have overheard that.
I don't think Cruz looked very impressed with that either.
No.
And it does occur to me that Jade getting ensnared in this was not really part of Peter's plan, so I'm wondering if that will complicate things a little bit.
And Danny, too, because Rosa's going to be very upset.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm wondering if that'll bring Cruz even more closely into it as well. I mean, not only is he friends with Joe, but, you know, obviously he's very close to
the Andrades.
Well, yeah, to the Andrades.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think this is... I don't know where this is going to go, but I think several people will be up in arms about it, and it seems a very suspicious, anonymous tip for cocaine when there's no real, background of Joe and cocaine. So,
and also, I mean, with all the things that have taken place at the Capwell House tonight, I'm also wondering sort of what Mason's motivation is at this point, because he's not very happy with CC at this point. It doesn't sound like he's necessarily going to pursue the district attorney job. So, does he still keep going hard on Joe, or does he put his energy somewhere else?
I mean, maybe now that he knows Peter's being blackmailed, he might think let's get rid of Peter first.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
Peter arrives home, and Joe confronts him in front of his door. Peter rushes into his apartment, and Joe runs in after him, only to be grabbed by one of taller of Ginger's two henchmen, I guess. And Ginger says to him, Antonio is in a lot of trouble, and now it looks like you are too.
So now Joe knows that Peter is also known as Antonio. And that Peter knows some very unsavory people.
So, I don't know, other than Kelly, who Joe can tell. Kelly and Cruz, I guess. So, that would give something for Cruz to investigate, if he's still helping out.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
And that's about it for this episode. So, we will see where Kelly winds up in episode 48 of Santa Barbara.
See ya.
Hi, welcome back to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
This is still week 10, and we have watched episode 48, originally aired October 3rd, 1984. Ginger tells Joe everything about Peter. This takes much of the episode. But...
there's a lot of Peter's history to
yeah,
cover.
Ginger tells Joe that Peter was an escort working for her. And Ginger sends one of her thugs to get Kelly. He reports in that she's at La Mesa. Joe offers to call her to have her come over because she trusts him more than she trusts Peter. And Joe has noticed that the other thug who's in the room has stepped on the telephone cord, so he thinks he can get the drop on him, which he does. He yanks on the cord. Peter grabs the gun. Joe knocks out the thug number 1, and then Peter wants to kill Ginger. He says that Ginger took advantage of him when he was, I think, 15 and hungry and starving, and fed him and forced him to work for her, and he beat her. She beat him and other boys who did not do what she said. So Ginger seems to not rebut these things, so it's not just Peter saying these things for Joe's benefit, it sounds like. So Joe stops him from killing Ginger.
Yeah.
And then Peter makes a deal with, or Ginger escapes.
Yeah.
And Peter says, okay, let's make a deal, Joe. You can see Kelly as long as you don't tell anyone about my past.
Yes.
And Joe says, yeah, I'll take that deal. And as soon as Joe leaves, Peter calls Mason and says, Joe's on his way to La Mesa. You better arrest him.
Now, I wondered about this because I believe Kelly told Joe over the phone that she would actually meet him at Sally's place.
Oh, that's right.
So, and Joe said, well, I just have one more thing to do. So, I did wonder, I was trying to, when I heard Peter say that, telling the police to go to La Mesa, I was trying to actually remember exactly what Joe had said on his end of the phone conversation. Because I think he just sort of said, oh yeah, something like that. So I don't think Peter realizes
he's not going to be there.
That he's not going to La Mesa.
So at La Mesa, where Kelly was dining, their old friend Sally Taylor was a waitress.
Yeah.
So she's been fired from Giorgio's, apparently, from offering Joe a job there to not working there anymore. Her fall and rise and fall was pretty quick.
She also looks like a completely different person.
She does, and I can find no information anywhere online about the previous actress who played Sally. She's not credited on IMDb, and all of the early episodes of Santa Barbara that are online have, I believe, replaced credits from the French version, and they only have the major characters on those credits.
Yeah.
So no one knows who she is.
No. But I was wondering, and of course you know far more about how these storylines are going to go than I do, but it did just seem to me that if Joe does meet up with Kelly, she's going to know all about Peter/Antonio, and that wedding might not take place. So it seems to me, for the sake of the stories continuing on in their devious ways, that Joe can't meet up with Kelly at this point.
That's a good point.
So I'm assuming that one more thing will delay him somehow. That somehow the cocaine that Peter had previously hidden in the motorcycle might come into play. The fact that Joe now has Ginger's gun with him, which he took with him to keep Peter from being tempted at all to kill anyone. I'm wondering if that might play a role, or if it's something completely different that's going to sidetrack him. But I actually don't think he's going to end up meeting with Kelly. Or if he does, I don't think he's going to have a chance to tell her about Peter.
Well, he did promise Peter he wouldn't tell anyone. And
that's true.
He has no reason to think that Peter's the one who set him up, as it's going to be Mason who shows up.
Yeah,
he still doesn't even know about the drugs. So maybe a while before he realizes Peter was involved.
That's true, too. Yeah. Yeah, because the other thing is, I think with Dominic looking more and more like is probably Sophia, I think that's something that is going to have to play out with Joe and Kelly as part of whatever that storyline unfolds as. So.
And don't forget that Ginger and her thug are looking for Kelly. So
and
they
Peter.
They may be keeping her from Joe.
Yeah, that's true too. I'm sure Ginger is going to want some retribution on Peter at some point as well. So.
Yeah, she's not just going to let this slide.
No, I don't think so.
Now, at the mansion, Cruz says that Joe's never been into drugs, so he doesn't buy this. And he says, Mason, you've gone too far. So he immediately assumes Mason planted these drugs. Both Cece and Mason threaten Cruz. Cece says, tells him what to do, and Cruz says, well, you can tell me what to do at work, but not at my off time.
Yeah.
And then Mason says, oh, well, if you're aiding Joe, you could go to jail as well.
But really, in the scheme of things, Cece and Mason consistently, completely fail at intimidating Cruz.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then Eden tells Cruz to meet her at the cemetery. He suggests his houseboat, but she says nope, the cemetery. And then Cece asks Cruz if he's the one who broke into Channing's room, and Cruz says no. So he says, aha, it must have been Joe. Cruz doesn't mention that the letters weren't found there.
No.
Or that Dominic is the one who took them. So.
But Cruz does, I think, get through to Cece a little bit, or it seemed like he did, when they do discuss Santana a bit, and the fact that Cece is not going to be able to keep the truth from Santana about Brandon's identity forever.
Cruz tells him that he knows everything. He went to Acapulco.
Yeah.
Found out that he and Gina arrived on a private plane and pulled up in a limousine and took the baby, and then Gina took a boat back up, and he, returned to Santa Barbara another way, and that he's going to tell Santana that Brandon's her son.
Yeah.
And that's how he leaves things with CC. Now, Warren and Summer are at the beach bar, and she's telling him about her love of art and how she ended up as an art historian. She said she's heard of the Lockridges from her sister and from Cece.
Yeah.
But she also says Lionel wrote one of the chapters in one of her textbooks. So this is another, bit of information about Lionel's successes that, haven't really been mentioned by anyone in his family. So, a lot of things happening at the beach bar. Mason briefly visits Santana, but then has a few quips, and then Cece arrives. So, when he arrives at Santana's, she's expecting Cece, so she opens the door and he says, I apologize for not being my father or my brother Channing. It's a great way to enter a room. So Cece takes Santana to the beach bar, and Lionel has come there to talk to Warren, so he spots Santana and Cece and sort of sidles over there to eavesdrop a little bit. They trade a few insults, but then Cece says, what do you want, Lockridge? And Lionel says, yes, I will join you, but only for a few minutes.
Lionel is completely soused at this point.
Yeah, they've been drinking. He and Warren have been drinking, so I don't know how on duty Warren is.
Yeah.
Maybe Warren was just drinking iced tea because it was a different type of glass. But he notices the bracelet Santana is wearing, and he mutters to himself that Cece gave Sophia's bracelet to Santana.
Yeah.
And then he goes to tell Veronica all about it and says that Cece gave Santana the bracelet that he had given Sophia.
Yeah.
So, or he mutters that in her place. I don't know if he tells her about that exactly,
but it does confirm what we suspected, that Lionel and Sophia had been at least a bit of an item.
Well, he says that he loved her, so this wasn't just a fling for him.
Yeah.
And he also says to Veronica, there are some dark corners of my life that have never been exposed to the light of day. So there's still some secret that he's talked about for the last few weeks that we don't know.
It will be really interesting as this part of the story unfolds to get a sense of when this was, because that'll have implications, I think, on a lot of other elements of the story, not only in regard to maybe Channing, but also vis-a-vis Lionel's marriage with Augusta. Was, he in love with Sophia when he was with Augusta? Or did this happen before? Or, what are the ramifications of that?
There's actually an interesting comment made when Warren and Lionel are talking. They mention how there was an attempt a few years ago for a truce between the Lockridges and Capwells, and Warren says, oh yeah, when they invited us all to Channing's party 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So this feeds into our questions about how many of the Lockridges may have been at that party and may have had an opportunity to kill Channing, or see who killed Channing, or interact with Channing. I realized when I was doing some research, actually getting some screenshots of Peter Mark Richmond for the spotlight,
Mm-hmm.
that he is not actually in that opening scene
Mm.
from 1979.
I wonder if that's before they had cast him.
Well, I'm wondering if they knew they would be replacing him,
Yeah.
and they knew they'd be replaying that scene again, when they tried to reconstruct the events of the night,
Yeah.
at some point, and they didn't want to have to reshoot it
Yeah.
just because he was in it. So I think we only see Mason, Channing, and Santana, and Philip, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in that first scene at the big party, and I hadn't realized that.
Yeah, that was clever. If that was
I
the
had
thinking.
assumed that Mason and CC were chatting, so I had misremembered that. So Mason and Eden get a chance to talk briefly about how she never liked Santana.
Which we'd sort of sensed from the cool reception she gave to Eden when Eden arrived at the party.
Mm-hmm. And then Eden heads to the graveyard, and she's at her mother's grave when Cruz arrives. And we find out that Cruz and Eden were at, however briefly, an item in Africa where they were involved in something that we don't know.
Yeah.
But she says they agreed never to see each other so that no one from the past could tie us to the present.
Mm.
I have absolutely no memory about what this storyline is. So
Oh, wow.
it'll be interesting to see what they were up to. So Cruz leaves, and then Lionel arrives with flowers for Sophia's grave. Eden hides when Lionel shows up, and he mutters a lot about her bracelet and how he's going to get it back for her, and then he sings to her, possibly some song that they used to listen to together. And then suddenly he spots Eden on the other side of the cemetery.
Right.
And he thinks it's Sophia. Because remember, they said a few weeks ago that Eden was a dead ringer for Sophia.
And of course he's in a graveyard and
A little bit drunk.
And I guess, he does know Eden is back in town just from the conversation he had with Warren when she first arrived. But he certainly would not be expecting to see her hovering around in a graveyard. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the only other thing I noticed is that Dominic is credited in the credits.
That's interesting, too.
Mm-hmm. So way back when, if you saw the actress's name in the credits, you wouldn't have had access to Google.
Yeah.
But you might have known the actress from just, her historical work. So.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to me to see what Eden makes of this little soliloquy that Lionel has given over her mother's grave, and if she had any inkling of this relationship at all. Just what she'll make of it.
She mentions she hasn't been to her mother's grave in 6 years, so that feeds into my theory that she actually, was at school before she went to England.
Yeah.
And maybe wasn't even in Santa Barbara.
Yes,
or
that's
living
possible.
or going to school there for at least another 3 years before she left the U.S. So.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll be back after we watch episode 49, and we'll see what Sally's apartment is like.
Oh, that'll be exciting.
We will see you then.
See you then.
Hello and welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
This is the final episode of week 10. We have watched episode 50 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired October 5th, 1984. Now, something we forgot to mention yesterday is that Warren had admitted to his mother, I think, that he and Channing were once friends.
Yes, and it sounds from the various conversations in this episode that he and Channing were actually pretty close in age.
And then something happened, and then Warren started stealing things from the Capwell house, I guess.
We don't know the full details of it, but definitely Warren does seem to be involved in the thefts that Joe had uncovered evidence about a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Now Lionel dreams about kissing Sophia, played by Marcy Walker, who plays Eden in the dream. And then he dreams about a woman screaming, which I think we've heard before a few weeks ago.
Right, so maybe this has something to do with some of the mysterious events around Sophia being found in the desert, or, whatever happened in her past with Lionel.
Mm-hmm. On the Joe Perkins front, we find out that he had managed to give the police a slip the night before.
Mm-hmm.
He'd stolen a surfboard and gone out to sea.
Yes.
And vanished.
Yes.
The Coast Guard can't find him. They talk about the closest oil rig being 10 miles out, and that he might, it's unlikely to have made it that far, but Mason has them searching that.
Yeah.
Kelly blames Mason for Joe, having to be on the run.
Yes.
And he says, "Oh no, just one of my men was on the beach and spotted him and called it in." So, not admitting to.
Yeah,
Peter
I
calling
think I think even if that were true, Kelly's still going to blame him for hounding Joe out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with all of Mason's protestations, we have to remember he had evidence planted on Joe, so he is 100% responsible for all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, that it may come out at some point how much Mason did to get Joe. So.
Yeah, definitely Kelly thinks he's being framed. She is not really believing that, that this is a clean offense.
Yeah. Now Mason searches for Joe on Cruz's houseboat.
Mm-hmm.
Says he's got a very loose search warrant and could just take everything if he wanted to. He doesn't like the fact he found some electronic equipment in Cruz's houseboat.
And Cruz is appropriately unimpressed with Mason and thinks absolutely nothing of mouthing him off.
Mm-hmm. He mentions at one point, I use this in my work at Catwell Enterprises, in my role as head of oil research and development, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then Mason says, "What's in a title?" And Cruz said, "I always thought about that, about assistant district attorney."
That's right. Yeah, and I think Cruz is really pointing up to Mason that he doesn't really know as much about Capwell Industries as he tries to appear. He might be a Capwell, but he doesn't actually know what CC does, and he doesn't actually know what is required to keep at least this part of the company operating.
Mm-hmm. Now, when he leaves, Cruz gets some fancier communications equipment out from a hiding place. He's got a little briefcase with a transmitter in it.
Yeah.
And he calls some of his friends at the CIA, which apparently he's working for.
Yeah, so that's an interesting development. And I have to say, this is a very impressive piece of technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all these flashing lights, and, well, it's mainly flashing lights, really. But it's got all these little matrices of lights.
Mm-hmm. So he gets them to take some reconnaissance photos for him to help him look for Joe.
Yeah.
And it's, it's off the books, so he's just asking them to do it as friends, not tell their bosses. So.
Yeah.
A bloody shirt, shoe, and a shark-bitten surfboard are found washed up about a mile north of where Joe had gone into the water.
Yeah, very grisly.
And Kelly identifies it as Joe's shirt.
Yeah.
So, Mason says to Peter, "Well, maybe we'll find Joe belly up out there. Then you'll have Kelly all to yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And Mason asks about Peter's blackmail problem, and Peter says it took care of itself.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because Ginger just ran out of the room. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
I wouldn't assume it was taken care of if I were him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seems to be a bit...
She knows where he is.
Yeah.
She and her thugs both got away.
Mm-hmm. As Peter goes, he says, "See you around, Mason." And Mason says, looks like it can't be helped. Now, Lionel's reading about the anonymous tip in the newspaper that got Joe arrested. He has some snide remarks to say about anonymous tips.
Yeah.
Augusta mentions that Eden's home, and it's the spitting image of Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
So next thing you know, Lionel is at La Mesa, and he's spying on Eden.
Yeah, I didn't quite understand what was going on between Lionel and Eden throughout this episode.
He's just obsessed with the fact that she looks like Sophia.
Mm.
So he starts leaving her love notes. Then he rents one of Sophia's movies and complains about having to put a $50 deposit down on a movie that's costs less than $50. And he freeze frames an image of her wearing a ribbon. Says, "Oh, no one can wear a ribbon like you."
Mm-hmm.
At the school, Mr. Bottoms marries the children. He performs the ceremony, and a lot of arguments with Ted as before. Marissa comes, though, to tell Jade that Joe's clothes have been found on the beach, and Jade's sure he's still out there. But Ted and the rest of the class go out in the hallway to console her, even against Mr. Bottom's insistence that they all stay in their seats.
Yeah, I had a little chuckle to myself during this whole scene because there's one point where Mr. Bottoms tells someone, I can't remember if it was Marissa or Danny, who made a brief appearance at the beginning of the scene, that Lyman is an institute for higher learning. And it seems to me that this has been sort of the most wackadoo class I can imagine. So, I have to say, I mean, I haven't seen it as an impressive scholarly environment so far.
Well, I don't have the teacher training you do, so I've never really realized it was that weird.
Yeah, well, maybe things have changed.
Kelly shows up at La Mesa and tells Eden that they were this close to solving the murder, and tells her all about Dominic. And Eden's worried about, Kelly's safety. Kelly says she's going to pick up where Joe left off and put Channing's killer behind bars. And
Eden seems to be sort of taken aback by this. And I sort of have a feeling, if you think about the beginning of the show, Kelly was just sort of fawning over Peter and excited about her wedding and everything. And now she doesn't live at home anymore. She's going off on this sort of detective project to complete Joe's work in clearing his name. So she's actually, you can imagine, she has changed over the course of the 50 episodes we've seen. You can imagine she's probably changed a lot since Eden last saw her, too.
Yeah, especially if she's been gone for 6 years.
Yeah.
So a gift arrives, and it's a ribbon that Lionel has sent to Eden. And she starts to put it in her hair, and from Lionel's look on his face, it's exactly the way Sophia used to do it.
So again, I'm kind of wondering, is Lionel just kind of being creepy with Eden, or does he have, some other motive for his behavior?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I wouldn't think he's going to recapture his romance with Sophia, with her
Eden.
Daughter.
I mean, maybe that
especially
is his
since
plan.
he's married to Augusta.
Professing his love for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that's what he's trying to do.
It could be. And once again, we have a creepy old man pursuing a romance with someone who could be his daughter, age-wise, maybe even in actuality
That's true.
in this
yeah.
particular case.
Yeah, we're still not quite sure of the ages of the different people and
Yeah.
how long Lionel and Sophia had their affair.
Yeah.
Augusta wants to know from Lionel if he pawned all the stuff he stole from the Capwells. And
From, you mean
from Warren.
Warren?
Sorry, Warren. Did I say Lionel?
Yeah.
Yeah, she asked Warren about if he pawned all that stuff, and he finally admits that he'd stolen the stuff. Just as summer arrives, so that diverts Augusta away from that conversation for a while. Summer just arrives long enough to say that she's got her job interview this afternoon, and will meet Warren for dinner afterwards to celebrate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then Augusta swoops back in, and she keeps trying to get him to confess to murdering Channing, and he keeps insisting he didn't murder Channing.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, all the things I've done for you all over these years to keep you safe," and they keep talking at cross purposes for quite a while until finally it sinks into Augusta that Warren is really telling the truth when he says he didn't kill Channing.
Yeah.
So this seems to completely shock Augusta.
Yeah.
Like, it seems to me she thought this whole time that Warren had killed Channing.
And I would be really interested to know, and we'll probably find out at some point, why Augusta was so certain that Warren had murdered Channing, and why she knew so much about him stealing the objects as well from the Capwell residence.
Well, if all the Lockridges were invited to the party,
Yeah.
Maybe Warren and Channing had an argument in the study, and Augusta overheard it from the hallway or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Veronica tells Peter that his next appointment has arrived. "Send him in," says Peter. And it's Ginger.
Yeah.
So she hasn't vanished, like Peter somehow thought.
No.
And she says she would like her $250,000 now.
Yeah.
And that is how we left things. So Peter, unless he writes her a check...
Which I guess he could do.
Yeah, I think Peter's in trouble.
Yeah.
And Joe Perkins may well be dead.
He might be dead. It's possible.
And Ted and Lincoln are married. In a weird way.
As part of a class project.
Yes.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll find out if Joe's survived his shark attack. And I guess Kelly's going to stay living with Sally. She's still angry with her family.
Yeah, yeah. And we did see a bit more Jade this episode, so maybe we'll see a little bit more about how the Perkins family is holding up under all this.
Yep. And we'll find out about Cruz's CIA job at some point. So that'll be exciting too.
Yeah.
We'll find out if Eden falls for Lionel. When we watch episode 51 of Santa Barbara. Bye.
See you later.